Team, what's happening? I'm going to turn the light up a little bit because we're a little bit just fucking down. We're a little bit dark there. Right. We're just waiting for YouTube and Facebook to load and go live. I think we're rolling now. Yes, mega sorted. Cool. Right. What's happening, guys? People jumping on Instagram. Hope you're good. Leave me a heart. Put me a heart on this. I want something different than usual. Give me a heart, even if you're watching this on the replay. Also, if you are watching this on the replay, please give me a hashtag replay. So, guys, jumping on now, give me a heart. We got one on Facebook, one on YouTube, 4 of you on Instagram. What's happening, team? I hope you are good. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. Quite an early one for me, this. That early. I'm still drinking my coffee. Still drinking coffee. Cool. Right. So I know you can hear me, you can see me okay. We're going to get going. I'm going to give it a minute, and then we are going to get into this. This is going to be one of those that you're going to want to grab a pen and paper and take some notes. But I'm going to say that when I do the intro to the podcast as well, because there's going to be a lot of actionable stuff that I'm going to give you guys in this as well, speaking about a few mistakes. But right, shall we hit record and get rolling? We're going to give it a quick test first, just to make sure it's working. As always, I'm going to give it a quick test. Yeah, mega. I've not done an episode yet on my podcast where the sound's not recorded, so hopefully that will never happen. Right, shall we get going? 3, 2, 1. Yes, gang, what's happening? Welcome back to another episode of the Type 1 Movement Podcast. Firstly, I want to say thank you for listening to this today, wherever you are in the world. I appreciate your ears, and you guys watching this on the live, I appreciate your ears and eyes. So, this episode, I was just saying to the guys on the live and at the start, grab a pen and paper, please. You can always obviously re-listen to it back. That's the point in these podcasts, because Instagram posts, Facebook posts, even YouTube can get lost. But these podcasts are there and you can always go back and listen to them. So grab a pen and paper, because I'm going to be giving you not only the biggest mistake that I see from type 1s when they're trying to improve the glucose control, but also a kind of like 3-4-step framework that I like to use with all my clients. So there's going to be a lot of the mental aspect of this stuff, but there's going to be a lot of practical shit that you can apply as well. Before we get started, as always, though, please leave me a rating and a review on the podcast app, as it really does help me reach more type 1 diabetics and have a positive impact on our community as well. Also, screenshot whatever device, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. We're watching this on Facebook, Instagram. Screenshot it. Share it to your Instagram stories and tag me at type1_Tom so I can reach out and say thank you very much to you. Right. I'm not going to beat around the bush with this. We're just going to get straight into it. Because the biggest mistake that I do see from other type 1 diabetics when they're trying to improve their glucose control is changing too many things at once. You'll know, because I've done this myself. My clients have done this. I think we've all done this. And I think it can come from the fact that, right, we've decided we want to improve our health. We know we need to improve the way that we're managing our diabetes and our numbers on our blood glucose, and ultimately to improve our health. So we go in all guns blazing. I mean, it's the equivalent to, let's say, someone who wants to drop body fat and they go super low calorie diet. They start exercising every single day. A few weeks down the line, like, fucking hell, they're feeling burnt out and they can't stick to it. The same with us when it comes to managing our diabetes. So changing too many things at once. This could look like giving a complete overhaul of the way that you're eating. Starting to work out every single day when you don't really work out. Starting to try and test your basal rate, testing your insulin to carb ratio, pre-bolus timing, throwing workouts in the mix and stuff. There's a lot of shit there, right? There's a lot of stuff that we have to keep an eye on in terms of us being type 1s. And this can get really sort of overwhelming and frustrating. Now, like I say, I understand why we do it, and it's done with good intention. But this is why I'm doing this episode, because I want you guys to understand that there's a better way to do it than going in, trying to change everything at once. It's like you might have listened to one of my podcasts and you're trying to implement that. Then you read something on the internet or in a group and you try and implement that. Before you know it, you've got all this information. You're trying to implement all of it and you're getting nowhere. And what happens is this starts to overcomplicate the process. I'm not going to lie, managing type 1 diabetes can be a complex and a complicated process, right? It can be. But if you're changing that many things at once, you're just making it harder for yourself. And this is probably the primary cause leading to feeling frustrated with managing your diabetes, leading to diabetic burnout when you're like, you know what? I can't be asked giving insulin anymore, testing my levels. It's all a bit too much. And also leading to that anxiety building up inside of you, right? Leading to that anxiety building up. Because you've gone in, you've changed all these things, and your numbers are probably all over the place. And the biggest thing is, if you're doing that, you don't know what's worked and what hasn't worked. If there's that many different variables that you've changed, that you've thrown in the mix when you want to improve your diabetes and your levels, how are you going to know what one specific thing has done and the impact that's had? Yeah. So this is something that I see quite a lot when I'm speaking to type 1s. I'm like, right, what are you currently doing? Well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I've got this, I've got that. I'm like, whoa, okay, cool. Good on you for trying, but let's dial it back a little bit. So, like I say, that's leading to frustration. It can lead to burnout. It can lead to anxiety around your levels, which ultimately can lead to you giving up and not giving a fuck about it. And I don't want that. If you're here, you're listening to my podcast, you're watching my lives, you obviously care enough to try and fucking educate yourself. And I don't want you to take in that much information, start trying to implement every single bit of it, and then feel lost and feel frustrated and then quit at the end of the day. So I want to give you a kind of four-step framework, if you like. And this is what I want you to take notes on, that I use with all my clients and that I've used myself to kind of simplify as much as possible the process of improving your glucose control. Obviously, I'll try and go as in-depth as I can. Too in-depth will be here for fucking hours. But I want to give you this, yeah? So this is kind of like the four-step framework, if you like. The first step is, yeah, the biggest one. Get yourself a pen and paper like you should be doing now, and you're going to write everything down that you're going to do and that I'm going to tell you. Why? Because if it's in your head, you're going to forget stuff. You're going to be like sieving through, what did Tom say? What do I need to do now? When am I going to run this test? When am I going to run that test? What happened on this test outcome? So the first things first, before we even start any physical application of running tests, is get yourself a pen and paper. Yeah, and you're going to plan things out. The first thing, this moves us on to the second step of the framework. The first thing is set some targets for yourself. So it could be goals of where you want your HbA1c to be, where you want your average glucose to be, where you want your time in target range to be. The reason being, when you set these goals, you write them down. That's like you signing a little commitment to yourself saying, hey, this is my goal. This is what I want to achieve. And to have a goal keeps you driven and moving forward when shit gets tough and it doesn't work out the way that you want it. Yeah. If you've not got stuff written down, you've not got goals, when things get a little bit challenging, the test doesn't go the way that you want it, you have a really busy day with family, you can't work out and stuff, these sort of bad habits, if you like, will start to creep in. Because you don't really know why you're doing it, you'll fall off track. Yeah. So first things first, get a pen and paper. You're going to plan and write everything out. Second thing, set some goals for yourself, set some targets. And even better, when you're setting goals and targets, try and set yourself a deadline. I will say, if you don't achieve it, if you set a certain average glucose or time in range and you don't achieve it within your deadline, so what? You've at least had something to work towards, and then you can move the deadline a little bit. You can move it. But if you set a goal and a target and you set a deadline, it's going to give you a little bit of healthy pressure to work towards. Yeah. Now we get on to what I see the most common issue when people do start changing too many things at once with this. Yeah. So the third thing, I've tied them together, but think of these as separate things. Third thing is you're going to start running a basal test on your basal rate, whether you're on a pens or you're on a pump. Do this first. Me and another one of my coaches, Fred, that coaches with me, are heavy on this with my clients. As soon as they come into my program, we're like, right, this is how the program works. Get them to watch all those videos. Then we get to goal setting and accountability posts, and then we move on to basal testing. The reason being, team, is if you're not testing your basal rate and you're going straight into trying to bolus for meals, insulin to carb, bolusing for fat, pre-bolus timing and all that, and then you change your basal rate, all those carb ratio with your meals are likely to change. They're likely to change. So first things first, when we get to running tests, we've got our pen and paper out, we're planning stuff, we know what we're going to do, we've set some goals, we've set some targets for our blood glucose levels, we've set a time frame what we want to achieve it in. Now we get on to testing, and the first thing we do is we test our basal rate. Basal rate, don't care whether you're on pens or pump. This is, and I rant about this all the time and use this analogy, this is the foundations of a house. Let's say you have a beautiful house and it's built on shit foundations, and one day you get a storm and it blows the fuck over and your house is gone. This is the same if you're not running a basal rate test and getting your basal rate dialed in before you start layering things on. But let's say we have a house, we have a fucking solid foundation, the house is beautiful, it can withstand anything. And it's the same for you. That's the best analogy I can use. Test your basal rate. Do you know what? A lot of type 1s that struggle with their blood glucose levels, if they understood more about basal insulin, how to test it, how to change it, will improve their control dramatically from just that one thing. Nail that first. And then this ties in with kind of number 3. This is all number 3, running basal rate tests. When you've got that, or you think you're there or thereabouts, well, a quick tip for you on basal rate testing: if you're on pens, you should be going to bed in range and waking up in range. If you're on a pump, you can get a little bit more dialed in overnight and throughout the day and stuff. You can get, into the nitty gritty, changing it every hour. That's a quick tip on basal rate testing. Next thing, you're going to move on to testing your insulin to carb ratio. Insulin to carb ratio testing. I said this time and time again, but I'll tell you the easiest way to test it, and how I test it and how I get all my clients to test it, is something dead fucking simple, like a sandwich. Because we know we've got around 30 grams of carbs. We want to keep the protein under 20 grams because we don't want a slow release of protein after the 3 hours because it's going to skew if you fucking test. And we want 5 grams of fat or under. We don't want a high fat meal when we're testing because we know we're going to get a delayed spike because of the fat. Something so simple is like a sandwich. Stick it in MyFitnessPal so you get the carb count correct. It's 20 grams of protein or under because we don't want that delayed protein release turning into glucose after, right? Stay with me here. And 5 grams of fat or under because we don't want that delayed spike slowing the digestion of the carbs down. We just want straight up around 30 grams of carbs. Go in with what you think your insulin to carb ratio is. For me, it was 1 to 10, so I went in with 3 units. If after 3 hours, you're back in range, awesome, your carb count's right. You probably will, a quick tip here as well, you probably will have a different ratio for breakfast, a different ratio for lunch, and a different ratio for dinner. It's quite normal. That is quite normal with us type 1s because the way that our hormones fluctuate throughout the day, right? So that is quite normal. Once you've found your basal rate, once you've found your insulin to carb ratio, maybe you can then look at pre-bolus time and stuff, but I'm not getting into that in this podcast. But once you've found these things, this moves us on to number 4, which is why I said number 1. If you remember the framework, get a pen and paper. Number 4 is track data and take notes for everything. Every test that you run, track data, take notes, and also schedule these tests in. Like, right, on Wednesday night, I'm going to run a basal rate test. Schedule that in to your diary for the week, yeah? You want to be running at least 2 or 3 tests. Every time we're testing something, we want 2 or 3 lots worth of data to even out any variables. This is another issue that I come across. Excuse me. A type 1, they'll run one test where I went high, no need to adjust it, so I've done that, and then I move on to testing my insulin to carb ratio, but hang on, I think my basal rate's off again. And then you get into that cycle of changing too many things at once. That's why I say 2 or 3, and I'm big on this with clients, 2 or 3 data tests to get that data, whether it's insulin to carb, basal rate, whatever it is, 2 or 3 lots of data. From there, chances are you can even out any variables, and you've got the notes there, which are going to enable you to then make those adjustments to improve. So, excuse me, it would tickle cough still. So I'm going to go over that again. 4-step framework. Step number 1, get yourself a pen and paper out or an online diary, whatever you want to use, and start to plan out what you're going to do. The first thing, I'm moving on to step number 2, is you're going to set goals and you're going to set targets, and you're going to give yourself a time frame which one you want to achieve those goals in. If you don't achieve them in that time frame, don't worry, doesn't matter. You can extend the time frame. It's just setting a time frame for something means that you're not going to fuck around. You fly in here, there, and everywhere. You're like, no, I've got to achieve this by this date. I'm going to put my all into it. You're more likely to do it. Like I say, if you don't, so what? You can move the goalposts a bit. Number 3 is you're going to start running tests. Then we get into the physical application of stuff. Start with your basal rate. Whatever you think your insulin to carb ratio is, just fucking do that whilst you're running your basal rate test. That's the best way. Once we've got our basal rate whereabouts there it needs to be, then we can start running insulin to carb ratio tests. I've told you the easiest way to test that. And then number 4 is what we're going to be doing all throughout this process, though, is we're going to be tracking data and we're going to be taking notes. So every test that we do, we've got it there. I've got loads of spreadsheets and stuff for my clients in our course, but you can do this yourself. You've got it there, excuse me, and right, I can look back on this day, I run this test, this was the outcome, so I know this is what I need to change. if you're running tests and you're not tracking stuff, excuse me, you ain't going to know the outcome of the test. It's simple as that. And also, another thing is, like I said before, program into your week what days you are going to run these tests on. That's one of the biggest bits of advice I can give you. Excuse me. So that is basically you working on things individually and not changing so many things at once. Because like I said at the start, if you're changing so many things at once, it's going to lead to frustration. It's going to lead to burnout. It's going to lead to anxiety. You don't feel like you're getting anywhere. And then you're not going to know if what you've done, if it's working or if it isn't working. Team, that is it. If you got value from this episode, please leave me a rating and a review on the podcast app. And as always, I appreciate you for jumping on and listening to this episode and also watching this live. Team, until the next episode, have an amazing day wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much. Peace. Right, I'm going to have a quick scoop through just to see if we have any questions off anywhere. Doesn't look like we have on Facebook. Nothing on YouTube. Have a quick look for you guys on Instagram. No. Sweet. Right, team, I'm going to jump off. Hope you got value from that. And until the next live, have a great day. Peace.